What you're about to watch is the very first Sense of Mind video newsletter. If you want to see the rest of it or sign up for the newsletter, hit the link in my bio for more information. These videos are delivered every Friday and they contain 1. A fascinating fact about the human brain. 2. Science-based productivity and happiness tips. 3. A book recommendation. 4. An inspiring quote. And 5. My thoughts about life, culture, or current events. Okay, so the first thing in this very first newsletter video is our neuroscience fact, and today it's about the strange science of tasting in your gut. Did you know that your gut, not just your mouth, can actually taste some foods? In addition to the 4 basic tastes, sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, scientists have proposed a 5th called umami. So just as sugar molecules stimulate sweetness receptors, glutamate molecules stimulate umami receptors. What's glutamate? Well, glutamate is an amino acid, and that means that it's a constituent of most proteins. So scientists believe that umami is supposed to signal that the food you're eating contains protein. But for many proteins, glutamate is not accessible to these receptors. So your brain has devised a clever way of sensing proteins in the food that you're eating. Throughout your gastrointestinal tract, there are glutamate receptors. So when the protein in food is broken down by digestion, the glutamate in those proteins becomes accessible and it stimulates the receptors in the GI tract. Those receptors send a signal to the brain, and the brain registers that protein has been consumed. And in order to remember that that particular type of food contains protein, the brain actually creates a positive association with the smell or the taste of that food. Often it's an association with what's called orthonasal olfaction. So it's basically smells that come up from the back of your throat. In other words, the gut says to the brain, "We got protein." And the brain responds by marking that food as desirable for future consumption. Interestingly, something similar is thought to happen with fat-containing foods as well. So the constituents of fats, namely fatty acids, are also too big to be sensed by receptors in the mouth, and so they need to be broken down by digestion just like proteins, and just like proteins, there are receptors for fatty acids in the GI tract that seem to do a similar thing. All right, next up we have our productivity or happiness tip. Today it's about productivity, and it is the Pomodoro method. If you're like me and you struggle with staying motivated throughout your workday, or if you're also like me and at various points in your life you're a student who has trouble for studying for long periods of time, I have a technique for you. It's called the Pomodoro technique. And basically what it is, okay, so choose a task that you need to do today that you don't really want to do, and preferably one that you don't actually have to finish, but which would be really good if you worked on it, but again, one that you're maybe not so motivated to work on. All right, and next, super simple, just set a timer for 25 to 90 minutes and simply work on that task. Don't get distracted. Don't even look at your phone. Don't let anything else distract you during that time. The reason that 25 to 90 minutes is the time period is, so on the lower end, 25 is, it's kind of like an amount of time that pretty much anybody can focus for. You can pretty much stay focused on something for 25 minutes. And if you have to go lower than that, there's no shame in doing like 20 minutes. But 25 minutes kind of lets you get into the task and lets you really start working on it. The reason I put 90 minutes as kind of the ceiling on that is that there is actually research, there's brain research, psychological research about these, what's called an ultradian cycle. And so basically all that's saying is that you can really only focus for about 90 minutes before you start hitting the point of diminishing returns. Now, I think that is definitely malleable from person to person, and it definitely depends on what you're working on. So if you're really, really into something, really interested in it, you can definitely stay focused for longer than 90 minutes. But this is just kind of a baseline, a good stopping point if you're wondering, what's kind of the optimum amount of time to focus. Okay, so then once you've done that for 25 to 90 minutes, take a break. Take like a 5-minute break, 5 to 15-minute break, maybe 20 minutes. Walk around, just do something where you're not thinking about that task. Take a walk, meditate, get a snack, read a few pages from a novel, talk to your friend. Maybe avoid things that are super stimulating, like watching YouTube videos and that sort of thing. But just do something that gives you, a brief period of rest so that you can come back more productive. And then do another 25 to 90 minutes and just structure your day in that way as much as possible. And if you do end up trying this, let me know what you think of it. It totally changed my life and made me way more productive when I discovered it as a college student several years ago. Okay, so our third item in this brand new video newsletter is what I've been thinking about this week. And it's basically balancing motivation and productivity with enjoying your life in the moment. I just finished a book called The Molecule of More by Daniel Lieberman and Michael Long. And it's all about the molecule, the neurotransmitter dopamine. And one of the major themes of that book is that, as a rough approximation, pretty much everything having to do with planning for the future, maximizing future resources, working hard to achieve something, or delaying gratification in general is pretty much driven by dopamine utilizing neural circuits in the brain. And also that everything having to do with enjoying the moment, relaxing, taking pleasure in the little things, and having fun is driven by different brain circuits that involve different neurotransmitters than dopamine. So while reading it, I realized that part of my own struggle with motivation has been that I was not honoring the distinction between these two systems. I have in the past caused myself to burn out really bad because I became overly focused, almost obsessed with delaying gratification, working hard to prosper later, and then losing sight of why I was doing that. What was the point? Every time I would start to realize that I wasn't actually enjoying my life. I was just pushing harder and harder so that I could be happy in the future. And now I refer to that as someday thinking, because someday I'll be happy, someday I'll be rich, someday I'll be satisfied. But does someday ever come? Now I realize that there's really no sense in doing that. It's not like you can delay gratification indefinitely. I mean, all of us are going to die someday, and we need to learn to enjoy the moment and delay gratification. I would say this balance is different for each of us. For me, I've realized a few things. First, I need to work toward goals that are relevant to me and which will increase mine and the people close to me's well-being in concrete ways. That's kind of my why. That's my motivation for what I do day to day. Second, I need to consciously put time aside to decompress and relax throughout the week and even throughout the workday, or else I am going to burn out and forget why I am doing what I'm doing. And finally, I need to push past the initial discomfort of starting a task because motivation builds on itself. Overall, for me, it's about balancing the future with the here and now. Okay, so next up, number 4 in our new video newsletter, what am I reading and what am I getting out of it so far? So this is a book recommendation, a kind of little mini, not quite a review because I haven't finished the book, or I am, just kind of giving my thoughts on it. And this week, as I just said, I just finished reading The Molecule of More, which was excellent. I'll have more to say about that in the future. But right now, I'm actually listening to an audiobook. It's called Intellectuals and Society by the economist Thomas Sowell. All right, so if you don't know, Thomas Sowell is a highly controversial figure. He's a Black conservative economist with strong opinions that honestly are backed by good arguments and evidence. He pulls zero punches in this book. So it was published back in 2009, but I'd say it's just as relevant today. Personally, Sowell is actually one of my favorite writers. Not necessarily because I agree with all his views, because I frequently do not. And to be clear, politically, I am a slight left-leaning centrist. But Sowell is just a fantastic expresser of ideas. He's just really clear and incisive and honestly very insightful. So this particular book is about how intellectuals, which Sowell defines as people whose work begins and ends with ideas. So he would distinguish between, scientists as intellectuals and, engineers. So like an engineer is not necessarily an intellectual because their ideas don't end with ideas, right? They end with some kind of project or some kind of concrete thing. So he says that these people are often advocates for poorly designed and poorly implemented policies that end up harming the public. Yet, these intellectuals do not suffer any consequences for putting forth these policies. So he's particularly concerned with intellectuals who step outside of their area of expertise, like mathematicians who advocate for unilateral nuclear disarmament, and there he's referring to Bertrand Russell. Or, for example, biologists who advocate for eugenics, like Konrad Lorenz. Now, what he's saying is, whatever you think of these policies, the reality is that these intellectuals pay no price for the damage that they cause, while they eagerly accept praise for the occasional one that actually does do good. So I would definitely recommend that book or other of Thomas Sowell's writing. I mean, I think that with Sowell, it's always a good read, and most people are likely to disagree with him on many points, but also I think he's just such a fantastic writer and someone that we should all pay attention to. Okay, and finally, the quote. So this quote comes from The Molecule of More by Daniel Lieberman and Michael Long, one I mentioned just a minute ago. And this one is actually related to politics, interestingly. And this comes from later in the book when they're discussing the liberal and conservative brains. So I just found this very interesting. Quote, overall, liberals are more likely to respond to messages that offer benefits, like opportunities for more resources, whereas conservatives are more likely to respond to messages that offer security, like the ability to keep the things they currently have. Liberals support programs they believe will lead to a better future, such as subsidized education, urban planning, and government-funded technology initiatives. Conservatives prefer programs that protect their current way of life, such as defense spending, law and order initiatives, and limits on immigration. Liberals and conservatives both have their reasons for focusing on threats versus benefits, reasons they believe are rational conclusions resulting from thoughtful weighing of evidence. That's probably not true. It's more likely that there is a fundamental difference in the way their brains are wired. End quote. Now, whatever you think of that quote, and I have some issues with it, what they're trying to point out is that liberals may, on average be more driven by dopamine. And as I was talking about earlier, that kind of has to do with planning and future maximization of resources. Whereas they're saying that conservatives are more likely to be kind of driven by what they call the here and now neurotransmitters. So the systems involved in enjoying the moment and relaxing and keeping what one has rather than trying to get something new. So I think this is absolutely an oversimplification, but it's something interesting to think about. And I also think that there are places where these things are reversed, where conservatives are more planning for the future and liberals are trying to conserve what they already have. So I think it's just important to keep that in mind. Whenever you see this kind of distinction where somebody is talking about the liberal brain versus the conservative brain, you should probably be skeptical. There's really not all that much known about the neuroscientific differences between these people, and I have to say that Lieberman and Long don't give that solid of evidence looking at the empirical evidence of whether liberals indeed are driven more by dopamine and if conservatives are not. They go with circumstantial evidence and kind of try to connect the dots there. Now, that should not be a reflection on the rest of the book. As I said, this is an amazing book. I would just say that this chapter on politics is, while very interesting and I think insightful, I do think it's a little bit lacking and could have been more rigorous. All right, so that about does it for the newsletter this week. So I am really excited for this. Please let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you like and what you don't like. These will be coming every week, every Friday. So honestly, please tell your friends, tell anybody who you think would be interested in this, and just share widely. I want to get a community going on these newsletters and draw something together that's even tighter than what we have on Instagram and on social media. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. As always, this video is brought to you by the Diamond Mind Foundation, and it was written and produced by me, Andrew Cooper Sansone. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, hit the link in my bio for more information.